Hello and good morning, everyone. My name is Justin Nimergood. I'm the host of the Real Estate Rockstars podcast. And today we're joined by hypnotist Ryan Christensen. Just a little bit about Ryan, real quick. Ryan is a hypnotist and author focusing on peak mental performance, emotional resilience, and life satisfaction. Ryan leverages his decades of experience in the military, counter-terrorism, and counter-proliferation worlds to dive deep and rapidly identify the core beliefs holding his clients back. Without further ado, welcome, Ryan. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Justin. It's an honor to be here.
Yeah. So tell me, and tell our audience out there, right? How did you get into this space?
Well, it's really kind of an interesting, very left turn Albuquerque kind of situation. I was doing the intelligence thing for about 23 years. Around 2019, 2020, I was realizing, the world doesn't want to be saved. So I'm clearly in the wrong line of business. And I was looking for that next big thing. I started doing some work on myself back in 2019. And one of the groups I was in a men's group working on some dating stuff. There's a guy who was a hypnotist talking about like toxic shame and emotional baggage. Well, Catholic got some of that. So I did a session with him and just felt lighter. You carry around 50 pounds of stuff, you get rid of 20 pounds, everything's just easier, right? Mm-hmm. That really caught my attention because I've been thinking about getting my degree in psychology, becoming a psychologist and a therapist. And that was going to take about $6.5 million to get that, which is an unappealing pathway in your 40s, to say the least. It's a very long runway when you're trying to talk about a 6-year career transition, especially that big of an investment. Absolutely. But I get certified as a hypnotist in about 6 months and 6 weeks for 2000, right? So it's allowed me to go ahead and dip my toes in, see if I really wanted to work with people one-on-one, start solving the problems that way. I did that in February of 2020. And as soon as I got my certification, everything shuts down because of the pandemic, right? And everything I do is classified, so I can't work from home.
Oof.
Right. So I got nothing but time.
You got nothing but time.
I got nothing but time. So I start, working with some folks online in these different groups, realized I had a talent for it and seen some pretty fast changes, some pretty big changes. I'm like, okay, there's something to this. Got a little more training. Started my business in April of 2020, went full-time in October 2020. Been doing it full-time ever since.
That's amazing. That's an amazing story. And you know what? I don't know how to perform hypnotism, but I did go through what some people call the foundational course, which was NLP many years ago. And then I know it goes up to like mastery NLP or trainer NLP. And then being able to hypnotize is kind of the you're at the top of the ladder. Let's put it that way. So it's wonderful to see that you were able to take kind of a negative situation and reframe it and turn it into a real positive and life-changing experience, it sounds like.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And, I love NLP. I think that hypnosis is such a powerful tool. It seems kind of like different tools in a lot of ways because trance work and the hypnosis itself is really about getting really deep into and really kind of uncovering the deepest, most core levels of the mind. Whereas NLP is a lot of techniques that sort of allow you to play with that part of your mind while you're still in the conscious state. And you can do some really cool stuff with it, but I think that what you can do with hypnosis is far more powerful. But you're right. Like it was a situation where, I saw the opportunity and just capitalized on it as best I could.
That's amazing. So I'm sure your work as a hypnotist has has its rewarding aspects, but it also has its challenging aspects. Could you maybe share first, maybe one of the most rewarding parts of your job, or even it could be a story, best practice or success story?
Well, I think that the best part of my job, the most rewarding part is that when I'm done working with somebody, they're finished, finished fixing themselves, finished healing, like they're done with that whole process, right? There's this idea that, healing has to be this lifelong journey. There's always more to fix. There's always more trauma to heal, right? There's always something more to do. And I don't feel that has to be true at all. Because if that's true, then it means you're always healing, which means you're always broken. Which means that no matter what you do, you're always going to be broken, right? And that's not a good way to live. Or this idea of like, you have to be 1% better every day. Okay, great. Which means if you're not 1% better every day, then you're failing.
Right.
If there's always 1% better you can be, you're never good enough, right? And there has to be an end to that sort of cycle. You can't be stuck on that treadmill forever. It's just toxic. So fundamentally, it's to get you off that treadmill, stop chasing that to where you can just be okay. You can be good enough. You can be healed. You can be done. with that process. You can move on from trying to fix yourself to living your life, fully in the best possible way.
That's really an incredible mindset, I will say, and philosophy for that matter. Because I'll be honest, as someone that's I've spent my time in personal development as well.
Mm-hmm.
I noticed that a lot of people do subscribe to the notion that you're always broken, you're never fixed, you're always
Yep.
improving. And it's funny because I see the same signs that you probably did that are like, okay, at what point is enough enough, basically?
Right. Yeah. And fundamentally, for those kind of people, it never is. It never is.
Mhm.
There's always one more thing to do. And it kind of makes sense, because if you're of the mindset, hey, all I have to do is just 1% better every day and I'll finally get there,
Mhm.
that gives you a pathway. It gives you a tool set. It gives you a way to get to, the finish line. It's got to be 1% better every day, just a little bit, right? The fact that the goalpost keeps moving, there's no finish line for you to cross, doesn't really seem to occur to people. But the alternative is like, okay, well then there's no pathway, there's no way out. You're just busted. There's just nothing you can do about it. That's a much more toxic sort of mindset, much more toxic perspective. So at least with the 1% better every day, people like there's a pathway, there's something you can do, right? You're not powerless. Even with the people who are on the healing journey time after time, it's like, oh, I'm doing, working on things, things are getting better. Yeah, better is better than worse, for sure. So it's a sense of agency that it gives them that kind of keeps them trapped.
Right.
There was a great quote by Dr. Gabriel Mate. He said, it's really easy to get addicted to something that almost works. Really easy to get addicted to something that almost works, because you feel better. You do, life is better, right? Problem is, like, turns out I'm autistic, didn't find out until I was almost 48. And because of that, I can't lie to myself. I couldn't pretend that better equals fixed.
Right.
So I didn't have the opportunity to say, okay, I'm better. I was like, no, you're not yet. So I just had to keep on digging until I figured it out.
That's amazing. So I'm sure that you probably you work with all walks of life. I'm sure, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
But I'd love to hear a success story of maybe someone that actually. I mean, I know it's kind of personal oriented, but someone
Sure.
that came to you from, that's a business professional or an
Mm-hmm.
aspiring, business leader that was stuck,
Mm-hmm.
and they look to you to kind of move through that, and perhaps even what it looked like for them on the other side once they were able to do that.
Yeah. So there's one guy in particular, a gentleman I was working with. He's in his 30s, making about 10 to 15 million a year in revenue, doing really, really well for himself. But he's just really kind of banging his head against the ceiling. Wanted to hit about 30 to 40 million mark. It just couldn't really push to make that happen. His relationship was good, but he was, partying a lot, doing a lot of the whole rock star kind of lifestyle thing, where maybe you should tone that piece down, right? And worked with him for a few sessions and really kind of broke a lot of that open. Because a
Okay.
lot of this stuff really comes down to like self-esteem and self-deserved worth, right? How worthy am I? Do I deserve this, right? And the answer is fundamentally, you deserve whatever you decide you deserve. You're worth as much as you choose to be worth, right? But if you have that feeling of I'm not good enough, you have that feeling of I don't measure up in some way, then you keep on trying to prove that wrong. But Ben Shapiro's got that phrase, facts don't care about your feelings. Gravity works. It doesn't matter how you feel about it. Well, unfortunately, feelings don't care about your facts. Right? Just think about every single argument you've been in with a woman where she got upset and you said, "Oh, honey, there's no reason to," and just see how well that works. Right? That just does not work. Which it did, but it doesn't. Right? That part of your mind is not paying attention to facts. It doesn't care. So you can't ever prove those feelings wrong. Can't ever prove those emotions, illusions wrong. So once you shift those down on a subconscious level to go from I'm not good enough to I am good enough, now the need to prove things goes away. So a lot of the stuff you do to look good for the rest of the world, so the world will tell you you're good enough and give you all the affirmation and give you all that acclaim, you don't have to do that anymore. Right? So a lot of the party and the other rock star flamboyancy and so forth and so on goes way down, because you don't need to do that to support your identity. And the brakes kind of come off in terms of like you stop holding yourself back from really going for what you want.
Wow. Well, that's a great symbolic story, I'll say, of just persevering and getting through. And I'll be honest, there's a lot of people out there that need your help, right, that need the help of a hypnotist, they've probably tried everything else out, or they think they
Yeah.
have, and they haven't
Yeah.
gone down this path. And I'm sure you get this all the time, but oh, hypnotism is taboo, right?
Right.
I would argue it's becoming more and more mainstream though. And I'm sure you've seen that evolve over the past 6 years as you've been in the space.
Sure. So one of my mentors used to say, people go to a hypnotist because they can't find witch doctor in a phone book. And these days they can. These days you still have to have the Amazon before you come see a hypnotist. And I think there's a lot of reasons for it. Hypnotism gets a bad rap just because most people's exposure to it comes from like the shows in Vegas, right, where they got you jump on stage, and you do stupid stuff, or it's the plot device in a horror movie that the villain uses to mind control you, right? So there's no real positive, serious role models out there or exposure to hypnosis as a sort of therapeutic technique or a tool that you could use to improve yourself. It's really not out there. But you see people who go to hypnotists, who use leverage hypnosis, making some really, really powerful moves. Like Tony Robbins he started out as a hypnotist. That's a lot of work comes from the NLP and hypnosis world, right? You look at Mike Tyson, his coach got him when he was really young, but took him to a hypnotist to get stuff sorted out, right? Which is part of what made him a champion. Yeah, talks about it all the time in the different biographies when he's talking about that period of his life. So you got sports teams that are having like professional hypnotists on their staff to do hypnosis work for the athletes. What was his name? Scottie Pippen had this one where he was getting they have the pool noodles they'd be waving in the background, distracted. The hypnotist actually did some work with him to where he basically flipped a switch and just like make that stuff disappear, so it wasn't distracting him when he was taking his shots, right? Wow. So it's an incredibly powerful tool. It's just not well known, not well understood, and that's a shame, right? And I think the biggest piece that excuse me, the piece that really scares people is this idea of like, I control your mind.
Yeah.
Control, that I'm doing it to you, that I'm doing that stuff to you, right? And people don't like that idea of giving up that control. It's scary, it's dangerous. They'd be, if that's how it worked, they'd be right to be scared,
right?
But it's not my control. It's a voluntary process. You're allowing me to lead you through this process, and you have to be willing to do that dance.
Yeah, you have to be willing and able. I do remember that from some of my LP training. And I think what I found interesting, or what I still to this day find interesting, is the ability of a hypnotist like yourself to help people, not only get the right self-confidence, but if they're dealing with a really serious vice, drugs, alcohol, nicotine, the ability for a hypnotist to, like you said, create that flip switch so they can switch it off, so they can actually move on from this addictive personality. Do you have maybe a story of that? Again, we won't take any names, but
I don't really focus on addiction work. I think addiction work is incredibly important, and hypnosis is a very, very powerful tool for that. Like the American Lung Association actually has a list of hypnotists on its website that focuses on smoking cessation, because you can get someone to quit smoking in a single session. A couple hours, you just never smoke again, right? It's that powerful. But if you're looking at things like, alcohol, drugs, some of the harder stuff, like that's a much more pervasive problem. Because the drug itself is just a tool you're using to make a miserable life worth living, to make it like suck less, or like be like pleasurable enough to be worth living. Right. And that's a much bigger, exactly. You got to find a way to make it tolerable in some way, shape, or form. And the drug or the alcohol is just the way you're using to do that, right? So that's a much bigger problem to tackle. And the drug itself is just one signifier or one tool you're using to kind of like manage that. And so what often happens is you take that tool away, great, they just find something else.
Right. Just a replacement therapy.
Basically. They just a replacement of some kind of other, right? So you got to do some real work of like, okay, we're going to make sure you're not dependent upon this thing, and we're going to figure out why your life sucks. So we'll fix that, so your life doesn't suck enough that you go find something else, right? So it's a tricky process, but yeah, it's incredibly powerful, right? Because your mind is trying to find ways to help you stay alive.
Absolutely.
Right? That's its primary function, is keep you breathing. Happiness is way down the list, right? And unfortunately, that part of your mind is looking at like right now, the instantaneous now.
Mm-hmm.
So all of its solutions are very short term oriented. It can't take into account those like second and third order effects, that long term impact, until that long term impact becomes an immediate threat to your survival. Right? That's what hitting rock bottom is. When your coping mechanism is about to kill you, right? That's when it wakes up, because that's the only time it can notice that other impact.
That fight or flight mode is activated.
Mm-hmm.
That's great, and I'm sure our listeners out there, appreciate kind of hearing the background on that. So we have one more. I have one more question for you
Mm-hmm.
in this section of our podcast before we move on to the final segment. Yeah, could you share, maybe we've talked about your rewarding,
Mm-hmm.
what's most rewarding about your job? Could you just share what's the most challenging thing about your job?
Man, the most challenging thing is when somebody comes to do some work with me and they're just not able to give themselves a break. Like, they're
Mm,
the only people that I really can't help are people who have like a really high level of self hatred or self loathing, right? Where
mm,
they blame themselves, like they are the problem, they are the reason everything's gone wrong, right? And if they can't give themselves that grace and don't have the capacity to forgive themselves even a bit, like there's nothing I can do,
right.
right? And it's just, man, it's so heartbreaking. But I remember one guy, we did 3 or 4 sessions, just got absolutely nowhere,
And
absolutely
then
nowhere.
at the
It's
end of
so
that,
frustrating.
do you just tell them like, "Hey, come back to me when you've finally let go of this," or
Yeah, well, it's like I told the guys, like, look, you need to go do some other work. Like, I can't work with you like this. You hate yourself too much. You can't forgive yourself. You're not willing to let yourself make any changes. I can't help you. You need to go find somebody. Go find a therapist. Go do some other kind of work to get to a place where you could do this when you're ready for that coming back. But somebody like that, they're usually not willing to give themselves that kind of grace, and they're not usually not willing to let themselves have that kind of help. Unfortunately, it goes back to deservingness. If you don't believe you deserve help, then it's really hard to get help.
wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow, wow, wow. This is really amazing stuff. I really personally get excited about this because you're talking about the rewiring of people's, minds and their
Yeah.
subconscious, essentially, right? This is
Yeah.
very deep work, but it's also long-lasting work at the end of the
Yeah.
day. This isn't a band-aid solution. This isn't talk to someone for 30 minutes and, you feel better and then it wears off. This is like making major life changes for the long haul. So I applaud the work that you do, Ryan. It's so much needed in our society, especially today. The Me Too movement and mental wellness. Let's just to call what it is. Mental
Yep.
health and wellness has never been more at the forefront of society than it is today, especially in America. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, it's one of those things where, man, there's an awareness of it, but there's so much blindness to how needed it is. So many
Mhm.
people are in denial of kind of the problems they're facing. So many people are just not willing to really look deep.
Mm.
Right? They'd rather stay playing with the band-aid solutions, the easy stuff, the things that don't really require you to take a big deep look at yourself and take a very big deep look at your life. And that it makes total sense, right? If there's parts of yourself you
Mhm.
don't like, there's things about yourself you wish weren't true. It's really hard to look at that stuff. It really is.
Sure.
But in order to make any changes about it, you have to allow it to be true long enough to do something about it.
Wow. Wow. Whew. I hope y'all are taking notes out there because this is really powerful stuff.
Thank you.
So we're gonna switch gears for a second. We're gonna go on to our final segment.
Hmm.
I'm gonna ask you some pretty they're not tricky questions, but they're
Hmm.
just make you think kind of questions, right?
Okay.
So the first one is, let's say, Ryan, it's your 80th birthday.
Hmm.
Who is there and what's going on? Where are you? Who's there with you? What's going on?
Man, I have no idea. To be honest, I have no idea. Like, I don't even look. For me, the first day that I went on my first psychedelic retreat back in 2021, and I was almost 46 years old, and that was the first day that I actually believed that life was worth living. And so for the vast majority of my life, I just never even bothered to plan for the future, and I still kind of don't. It's much more of a I want to be surprised.
You won't be surprised.
I wouldn't be
Okay.
surprised. I want to see. I want to see how good it can be. I want to be. Yeah, I want to be surprised by how amazing it can be.
Wow. That you're the first person that I've had on the show that's said something to that effect. Because of course you always get a lot of people that say family,
Yeah,
friends, whatever. But I think you're bringing up a whole another aspect of this, which is the element of surprise and how you know what that is a major motivator for certain people. It sounds
yeah.
like yourself. That's great. So the second question uh, is imagine for a moment that it's your
Mhm.
last day on Earth and you can only preserve three items in your time capsule, right? Just three items you can take with you, right? That will be preserved in your time capsule. What are those and why?
Well, I think it would take an eagle club and anchor, which is the Marine Corps emblem. That's very important to me. It's been very central to who I've become. Was having that experience. Can't say I was a good Marine, but it was very transformational for me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, my wedding ring. I'm going to be.
Mm-hmm.
I want to get married again. That's going to be a big part of my life going forward. So that, and then I think those are the only two things I need.
Yeah, that's great. That's really, really great. Last question for you. What is your definition of a rock star?
Mm. Someone who just plays full out.
Plays full out.
Yeah. In
Under
whatever way, just playing full out, living full out, just zero restraint or restriction on being the most of who you are.
there you go, folks. You heard it firsthand from Mr. Ryan Christensen. Ryan, tell us and tell our listeners out there where can they find you? Where can
Mhm.
they connect with you?
Sure. So I would start at my book, Winter Peace: How to End Inner Conflict and Make Success Inevitable. It's available on Amazon, in all the different formats. It'll help you get to a place where you know you're good enough, you're ready to rock and roll, you can be your full you. Other than that, www.ryanthehypnotist.com is my website. For free 45-minute consultations, we'll sit down, take a look at your life, what's not working, and figure out a way to get you where you want to be.
Wonderful. Amazing, amazing stuff. Ryan, thank you so much for coming on. We really appreciate it. I know your message and your content is extremely valuable. What the work you do is extremely valuable. So thanks for taking a couple minutes and joining our show here today. There you have it.
That was fun.
Another great
Yeah.
episode here on the Real Estate Rock Stars. We'll see you next week.
Thank you so much.